This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Welcome to our Thursday night first meeting of the year, New York Giants Preservation Society. Welcome aboard. I'd like to wish you a happy New Year. However, according to Larry David and his statute of limitations, you lawyers and judges know, it is only allowed to be said 3 days after the New Year. So I cannot, in good faith, say Happy New Year.
Wait, as grumpy old men, we don't have to follow any laws. So go ahead, Gary.
The grumpy old woman.
All right, before we start with our wonderful guest tonight, Noel Hynd, just a couple of other things. I don't know that, we have our Facebook page, which is very, very popular. We also have our regular website page, which I don't even know how many people go on it. I basically pay for it every year to more or less legitimize us, and I have money to pay for it from donations and stuff. Do you guys feel, since it's our organization and not mine, should I donate that money toward that cause to keep the website up?
Sure.
And anybody have any comments?
No,
Yeah,
I
if
think
it's reasonable money, I think it's a good idea
It's
to keep it.
$130, and
Keep the website up because some people don't use those other devices like Facebook.
yep.
Yeah, that's another identity that we should utilize.
I was hoping you guys would say that. That was my opinion, but it's due on the 11th, so I'm going to take care of that with, like I said, people have donated over the years, and we have money for that. So I am going to renew that. So, right, that's in the book.
Good.
And the last thing, next week we have Will the Thrill Clark. I expect a very large turnout for that. I know this is a New York thing, but when you get somebody of his caliber, you don't say no. And I was shocked he said yes. So really looking forward to that. I'm going to be sending out the invite tomorrow. There's going to be a clip from his retirement ceremony, baseball reference, a little bio of him from what he's doing now in the Giant front office. And lastly, there's a donation page. He has an autistic child, and he works very, very hard as a spokesperson in San Francisco. And if anybody wants to donate any money, that'll be up to them. But I don't want you to say, hey, why is he sending this out? Because I'm sending it out because it's a nice thing to do. We're not paying him, and you can do whatever you want. I'm just letting you know. I don't want anybody saying, why is he sending out asking for money? The money's not for me. So I'm not asking you to do anything. That's all up to you. Okay?
Thanks for the info.
You are so welcome. Tonight we have a special guest who's been here. This will be his third time, Noel Hynd. Noel actually was our very first speaker via virtuality through Google Meets. We did not start off as Google Meets, as Zoom. Our first maybe month was on Google Meets and not Zoom. And he talked about his book about the Polo Grounds, which is, fabulous. Our group is mentioned in there. It's some of our constituents have actually added to that piece, and it's a great book. And Noel has a brand new book out called The Sputnik Season, 1957. He's going to be talking about this, and it says the year New York City baseball and America changed forever. So you're going to hear some about America, and you're going to hear about the Giants and Dodgers last year in New York City. So please welcome one of our members, but just a terrific author, Noel Hynd. Noel,
thank you.
Welcome back again.
Thank you. I haven't done a Zoom I hope you guys are feeling indulgent because I haven't done a Zoom for about a year. So I'm going to try to go to a split screen here, if Gary permits it.
Yep.
Are you guys,
there you go.
are you getting that?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to try to get other stuff out of the way here, and just bear with me while I clear my screen. Hide thumbnail video. Okay, I'm going to walk you through the 1957 season. I do not have a script, so I will be making, and I haven't read the book for more than a year, so I will be making plenty of slips along the way. You'll probably catch them, but 1957 has always been a year that had a lot of resonance for me. It was the first year that I could really, really remember a pennant race. I have a foggy recollection of 1956. I love two things. I love baseball category, without any kind of qualifications. But the two things that really excited me were the New York Giants, because everybody else was a Yankee fan or a Dodger fan. So damn it, I was going to be a Giants fan. I loved Willie Mays. I thought he was the most exciting player that I saw day to day. I lived in the New York area, so we got, as many of you did, 3 home teams on television. But I also was a big fan of Stan Musial. Musial was my favorite player. So when my dad took me to games in 1956 and 57, we went to the Polo Grounds and we went to see the Cardinals. The first game we went to, Musial hit a home run. It's a great story, except we got lost on the west side and missed the first inning, and that's when Musial hit the home run. Nonetheless, I'm going to walk you through my favorite season. These guys did more than walk through the season. That's Warren Spahn and I believe Lou Burdett on his right. And let's see whether I can go to the next. Yeah, here we go. The season began, as you can see, on Monday, April 15th, 1957. This is Griffith Stadium. Can you guys see my, well, you might be on mute. I'm going to use my pointer
Cursor.
here. Yep. Cursor, that's the technical term. Never could get those terms right. Anyway, here's our president from the 1950s. If you look very carefully, there's Richard Nixon lurking behind him.
It's Eisenhower.
Ike has isn't paying much attention to Nixon. He never did. Charlie Dressen, Paul Richards, who was a catcher for the John McGraw of the New York Giants. Interesting thing, Richards had a unique post. He was both the manager and the general manager of the Orioles. They'd only been in Baltimore for 3 years. They were struggling to make the next division. Ike stayed for the whole game, eating peanuts, drinking hot chocolate. Notice Nixon moved down to sit next to him. The Orioles outlasted the Senators 7-6 in 10 innings. It was 40 degrees. Ike sat there for the whole game. None of this leaving early. I have about 70 slides here, so I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. If you have questions, if I can hear you, jump in or save them for the end. On the wrong way, now we go. There's Mr. Nixon again. I just can't take my eyes off him. My wife's name is Patricia. Nixon's wife was named Patricia, and so was Tricia sitting there next to him. Assigned him an icon of the 1950s, but Nixon took the game pretty seriously. Anyway, 57 was the first season I remember. As I said, weird stuff happened that year. My favorite player was Stan Musial. I said that. Notice when he was young, he was not wearing number 6. He wore number 19. Just like Mantle wore number 6. And he was, that looks weird, doesn't it? And here's Henry Aaron wearing number 5 before he turned 44 into an iconic baseball number. 57 was the last year for the Giants and the Dodgers in New York, as you all of us painfully know. Unfortunately, these were not the 1951 Giants, and they weren't the 1954 Giants. These were, and there's our friend Eddie Logan sitting down there as the bat boy. These are the 1957 Giants, and the glory had pretty much left the Polo Grounds. There's Jackie Grant, some memorable players, Foster Castleman, Don Mueller on the right, Joe Margieri, I think, and Ossie Virgil, perhaps on the right. Forgot who that is on the left. That is, I believe, Ruben Gomez.
Oh,
And
right.
here's a guy who, for a few hours, was a member of the Giants. He was faking his enthusiasm for the December 1956 trade. If they could have gotten him in uniform, he sure would have helped in 1957. You just don't see a picture of Jackie Robinson holding up a New York Giants pennant that often. So glad to bring that one to you. Here's guys who escaped the Giants. We've got, this was the 1956 trade. From right to left, that is Al Dark, Ray Cobb, Don Little, who is best remembered for having easily retired Vic Wertz to the World Series, and Whitey Lockman. Notice those horrible Cardinals uniforms. Frank Lane, the general manager, took the beautiful birds and the bat away for a year. Everybody hated those things. Eventually, they hated Frank Lane also. These guys were not too happy to be traded off to the Cardinals in '56, but they brought this guy to New York, who really was also one of my favorite players. It was really odd seeing him out of a Cardinal uniform after all of those years, but he was one of the standouts, at least for the first half of the 1957 season for the Giants. They also had a couple of fine players here. You'll recognize Johnny Antonelli on the left. I won't even bother to say the name Willie Mays because nobody looking at this could not recognize Say Hey. It's almost against my religion to have a picture of Willie Mays in a San Francisco uniform. I can barely tolerate it in a Mets uniform, but man, was this guy a gorgeous player when he played for the Giants those first, I guess, 6 years of his career. They were essentially, the three guys I just showed you were pretty much keeping the Giants out of the basement for part of the year. And picture of Willie, looks like he's on Fifth Avenue or Broadway, maybe down toward Wall. Nobody was so revered.
No, I think you froze.
On the street, the way Mays was. Sorry, somebody said something?
Yeah, I think you froze for a second.
Okay.
Are those any famous people in there? Guy looks like Carl Reiner a bit, but he probably looked too old on the right at
It
that
does.
point.
Am I okay to continue?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Here's the problem. A lot of players on the field, not many people in the grandstands. I believe that's a 50, that could be it might be the last game that looks like the Pirates in the field, but those empty seats were absolutely killing the team. Giants finished sixth that year. The Dodgers faded to third, but here's a preview of the best team in the National League. Eddie Matthews, Hank Aaron, and that's Frank Torrey, Joe's older, who took over at first base during the season when Joe Adcock was in. 400 spots in the Major League roster in 1957. Close to 50 of them landed in the Hall of Fame. Here's a guy who landed in the Hall of Fame, but not because he was a pitcher. Turned into a great manager later on. You do not see Tom Lasorda in a Kansas City uniform that often. Here are some other guys who made the Hall of Fame, and of course, these guys were across town. The Dodgers put on a pretty good run in 1957, but they were getting old. It just wasn't there anymore. Campy was hurting. I've come to really like and respect these guys in retrospect over the years. When I was 10 years old and a Giants fan, not so much, right? Another great player that year. I grew up looking at these guys. You couldn't believe how many Hall of Famers there were. Everybody's absurdly young in the 50s, except Musial and Williams, who were both leading the league in hitting. K-line. Frank Robinson, often at the top of all the statistics, and the one he was frequently right at the top of was being hit by pitches. There was no official Cincinnati Brooklyn game in which Don Drysdale didn't hit him at least once. Clemente, Ernie Banks, Richie Ashburn, Robin Roberts. These guys I wrote to these guys for their autograph in 1957, and they both signed, sent them back to me. 2 Hall of Famers on the same card. My mother threw it away in 1964. Oh, well. Aaron, Williams, Musial, and Mays were the 2,300 home runs in that picture. Now, during the 57 season, there was a young left-handed pitcher in baseball in 1957, a New York kid with a great fastball. You're right if you said Sandy Koufax, but more significant during the season was Herb Score. The White Sox and the Yankees were fighting for first place. In early May in 1957, in a game against the Yankees, Herb Score was hit flush in the face by a line drive off the bat of Gil McDougall. It's one of those baseball plays that if you were alive at the time and watching and saw it, you never would forget it. Unfortunately, just bringing this up, I'm reminded of the horrible injury just the other night in the NFL. It was like that. Everything stopped. Score was nearly killed. Obviously, one of baseball's most horrifying injuries. It is incredible that he survived it. When the ball off McDougall's bat was hit, according to many people who remember it, there was sort of a lull. It was in the first inning, I believe. There was a lull in the stands. It was quiet for a moment. You could hear the crack, and less than half a second later, you could hear all over the stadium the impact of the ball hitting Score directly in the face. How did a guy like that get hit? He was a left-hander and had a funny quirk to his rotation where he took his eye off the ball in coming back to a standing position. His eye lost the ball right when it was coming off the bat. So he didn't pick it up that night. Every other time in his career, he would have seen it, not that night. It was amazing he survived. He was never the same again after that, but he obviously, as many of you know, he did make his mark as a professional in the broadcast booth for the Indians. A little more than a week later, with the Yankees still lagging back in the American League race, Billy Martin on the left had a birthday. And we know where he went to celebrate it, with teammates, to the Copa. The Copa was owned by this fellow, silently, of course, off the books, Frank Costello, and the place had great entertainment. Lewis and Martin, I think that might be Danny Thomas, by the way, doused. Those those shorts were blue mink. No further comments. Anyway, there's the party in case your invitation never arrived. May 15th, 1957. Not sure who took this picture. Those are wives. Martin was there by himself. Hank Bauer was there. And they were there to see Sammy Davis Jr. Couldn't hear the show because the bowling team from the Bronx came in. And then they started to make racial taunts at Sammy Davis Jr. I will not repeat any of those, obviously, but ball players took exception to them, which is really kind of interesting because the Yankees had a bad reputation on race because Elston Howard was obviously the first African-American to come play for the Yankees. Stengel made a couple of remarks which haven't worn well over the years, but these guys ended up in the washroom on the floor with a broken jaw. Just recently, a fellow came forward who worked as a bouncer, a guy named Joey at the Copa, who claimed he threw the punch and that Bauer got a bad rap over the course of many decades. These days, by the way, if it had happened, the Yankees who went after this guy would have been hailed as heroes for standing up against a bigot. But times change. Martin, the birthday boy, found himself in the new uniform not long after. In the Midwest, right at the trading deadline, got sent off to Kansas City. But not without a major brawl between the Yankees and the White Sox at Comiskey right before Martin got traded. Martin participated in that fight also, as did Enos Slaughter. Slaughter just looks like a guy you don't want to tangle with, but he was right in the middle of the brawl. It started when a Yankee pitcher named Art Ditmar threw some high tight pitches against Larry Doby. Doby claimed that there were racial remarks exchanged. There was pushing and shoving at home plate, and then the next thing you know, the bench is emptied. Anyway, in the National League, as I said, age had caught up with the boys of summer. There's a fellow I met one time on the far right, Emmett Kelly. My father did a magazine article on him, and I later got taken to the circus at Madison Square Garden, and we went back to the dressing room. I was about 10 years old. And believe me, the dressing room at the circus was a new world to a 10-year-old kid. Anyway, that's the mayor of Los Angeles sitting between Snyder and Kelly. Why would the mayor of Los Angeles be at the Dodgers spring training if Walter didn't know too much about movement? Anyway, these are the stars in New York outside from the National League. Eventually they would come back, as you know, to do cameos with the Mets. But for now, these are the guys who were powering the Braves to first place. 73 home runs, 226 RBIs. And this doesn't even include people like Joe Adcock hitting and Frank Torrey hitting behind them. I've always thought this was the toughest 3-4, as tough a 3-4 combination as has ever been regularly in any batting order in the major leagues. But that's just me. I consider them under equal to Ruth and Gehrig. Anyway, the Giants won the pennant in 1957, but not for themselves. They unloaded Red Schoendienst, who was hitting .307 at the trading deadline also, to the Braves. Red was happy to get out of New York. He went to a contender and was the piece that was missing from the Braves lineup that year. Warren Spahn was winning 21 games. The only thing standing in front of the Braves for first place were these guys. That's Vaughn McDaniel, who won 7 games that year. Lindy McDaniel, who later was a great reliever for the Yankees. Dizzy Dean on the far left. Vaughn McDaniel broke in as sensationally as any rookie ever. He absolutely fascinated me because he was 18 years old in that picture. He came in through a 2-0 shutout against the Dodgers at Ebbets Field, a game I watched on a little black and white television. Absolutely sensational. In addition to a great pennant race in the National League, the McDaniel brothers were what everybody was talking about. They were everywhere. On the cover of magazines, they were Christians and revered by a large element of Americans outside of the cities. But the Cardinals took a strong run at the Braves. Then there was a big series in September against the Braves in Milwaukee. Guess who had the big hit in an extra inning game? Hank Aaron, of course, to put the Braves, to clinch the pennant for the Braves. Onward to the 1957 World Series. Mantle was injured during the series. Aaron hit .393 with 3 home runs. Spahn only won 1 game. Lou Burdett, a 17-game winner, completed his 20-win season by winning 3 in the World Series. The Yankees couldn't touch him. If you have a long memory, you'll know that Burdett was a Yankee farmhand in the early 1950s. They traded Bill Verdon, who was still in the minor leagues, to get Burdett. The, the, the Braves acquired Burdette for Bill Verdon. I'm messing that one up, sorry. There was a trade involving Burdette from the Yankees organization. Bushville wins. Milwaukee was absolutely delirious. One of the things in the book that I go into was how baseball in Milwaukee was just a civic craze that year. Frequently, one is asked whether O'Malley belongs in the Hall of Fame or whether Stoneham belongs in the Hall of Fame. Really, Lou Perini, who moved the Braves from Boston to Milwaukee, if the other owners are in, he should be in also. Here's the jubilation. You can see that was at Yankee Stadium. Those are the Braves road uniforms, but it was a beautiful World Series. Look at that. That's Milwaukee. There's Aaron home uniform. That's what Yankee Stadium looked like. You can see some of the sites of the Bronx, like the Bronx County Courthouse back here. The House of Detention is down that way. Look at those, not an empty seat. This was the first World Series that I ever went to. My father got tickets from a scalper. He always said he bought them at the bank, but he got them from scalpers. $7.50 for a box seat way down the left field line. This is where we sat down here. And in the sixth game, where the Yankees were facing elimination, it was either Yogi or Hank Bauer hit a home run down there in the seventh inning that gave the Yankees a 3-2 victory and pushed it to a 7 game, which this guy pitched. Lou Burdette again. But why is it the Sputnik season? First, the Soviet satellite was launched on October 4th, 1957 on a travel date between games 2 and 3 of the World Series, launching the space age and the space race, causing shock, surprise, and alarm in Washington and displeasure. But also, the original meaning of Sputnik in Russian meant co-traveler or fellow traveler. Draw your own conclusion. Those are 2 travelers right there. O'Malley leading Stoneham into an airplane, heading west. They beat it out of town, took their ball clubs with them. Baseball in the world would never be the same. New York had lost, obviously, as you know, its teams in the National League. It was a one team city until 1962 when the Mets came back. And that is the end. Believe me, it took many months to live through the season. It took me about a year to write about it. I've tried to encapsulate it in a few minutes.
No, that was wonderful. Great job.
Thank you.
And Noel, I'm going to show the cover again of the book. How, you mentioned you haven't read it in a year. It came out in 2022, though, correct?
That is correct. It came out spring of last year. It's still doing very nicely on many of the baseball lists, including.
Are all those pictures in the book?
I don't have the rights to some of them, but there are about 60 pictures in the book that I didn't have a chance to put up today. I didn't want to just do a complete rehash of the book itself here. For example, and there are several side stories that I really didn't get into today. For example, it was the year that the voting was, the ballot boxes were stuffed for the All-Star balloting by people in Cincinnati. And the commissioner had to step in and basically interfere with the voting. Because of that, George Crowe was leading Stan Musial for a while at first base. Come on. Gus Bell was ahead of Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. So the commissioner stepped in. It was Ford Frick at the time, and the balloting was not returned to the fans until 1970.
No, we're going to start taking questions. But again, best way to get the book is through Amazon?
Amazon, that's the fastest and the easiest way. And quite frankly, Amazon is my publishing partner, and they can be a little weird. It's like dealing with an elephant sometimes. It does what it wants. But for me, it has been much better than dealing with New York publishers.
Your pictures were fascinating. My one question is this. The subtitle is The Year New York City Baseball in America Changed Forever. I know this was a quick review. How deep do you go into the Dodgers and Giants leaving?
I kind of treat it as a story that was unfolding as the season went by. Quite frankly, in my opinion, as soon as Walter O'Malley acquired rights to the Los Angeles minor league team, I think the Dodgers were gone. The loss of the two cities, sorry, to the two teams for New York City has been covered in so much depth that this would have turned into an 800-page book if I'd gone after that. So really, this is more about what was going on the field. And I wanted to, you can't look at that season without realizing what an incredible player the young Henry Aaron was. That's the one thing. I knew he was a great player before I started to write that book. And he used to kill the Cardinals, kill the Mets, or killed everybody. And he put up with an awful lot of racial stuff, as did all of these guys in 1957. I go into that a little bit. There was also 57 was also the year with a lot of UFO sightings, which was a story in and of itself. There was one pitcher who actually got up with the Cubs toward the end of the year, who, in all seriousness, claimed that a flying saucer came over his minor league, his minor league field one time.
Like I said, again, the pictures were great, and somebody of my age, I mean, honestly, no, you got to give us back the screen.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
There we go.
I get scared anytime that happens. Honestly, somebody my age, when I saw that picture of Red Shandies, I knew he was on the New York Giants. I didn't realize about Atlanta. I just knew him as the manager of the Cardinals for forever. And it's great to see the real history of somebody who's in the Hall of Fame. And, like I said, me just knowing him as the manager of the Cardinals. But just the pictures were fabulous. And thank you so much for sharing. And you did a great job Zooming, considering you haven't done this in a while.
Yeah, I get to go change my shirt now.
Mars, go ahead. Mars, unmute.
Thanks for joining us, Noel. You brought back a lot of memories. You and I are probably around the same age. I was born in 1947. 1957. Pardon?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
You win something. I was born in 47 also.
So it was such a pivotal year. What's your opinion on Stoneham and O'Malley were looking for other parts of New York to build a new ballpark, and of course they were at the mercy of Robert Moses. What's your opinion on, since they already had the Polo Grounds and they could have tore it down to build a new ballpark on the same site while the Giants played in Yankee Stadium, let's say if that was possible. What's your take on why didn't Stoneham explore building a new ballpark on the Polo Grounds site, since they wouldn't have to look for another site?
I think, and a couple of times Stoneham came very close to admitting this. It's the answer to that question is kind of ugly. I don't think he wanted any part of building in a neighborhood that was essentially African Americans. He thought, and this is the way a lot of white people at the time thought, the cities are gone, they're being taken over by non-white people. And the future is automobiles and people driving to a ballpark. So that's why, if you notice, the Dodgers were positioned very close to freeways where cars could get there. And one of the big things that Stoneham was promised in San Francisco was a huge parking lot. And one of the things that O'Malley was obsessed about, and I go into this in the book, was that the Braves, who were leading all of baseball in attendance, had a 10,000 car parking lot, and they were charging $4. I know that seems like a joke right now, $4 a car. But it was like $40,000 cash, plus whatever you could skim, on every home date. And the Milwaukee Braves were becoming a very, very wealthy franchise from that. And O'Malley couldn't build anywhere near Ebbets Field where he could have the parking. I don't think O'Malley was serious about staying at all. There was, whenever somebody seemed to come up with a solution, there was something wrong with it. He just wanted out of New York.
Well, no, the argument that I have against that is the South Bronx, where the Yankees played, was far worse than the Polo Grounds neighborhood.
Not at the time. I can remember going to both. The South Bronx deteriorated more in the late 60s and 70s. Yankee Stadium was seen as the, quote, safe, unquote, ballpark that you could go to. I once, my father was a true crime writer, and he had got a lot of a cigar. I love a cigar. He knew a lot of people. One day, a fellow came to see him named Lee Allen, who was the historian at the Baseball Hall of Fame. Lee Allen sat in front of me and was talking about how the Dodgers and the Giants could not guarantee their customers' safety against robberies as they sat in the box seats watching games. Those two places, whether it was true or not, just had a reputation of being unsafe.
Well, Yankee Stadium, even in the 50s, was a bad neighborhood, and there was a lot of crime. Cars were stolen. So I don't think it was any better than the Polo Grounds neighborhood, because I remember going to see Ted Williams. That's the only time we'd go to Yankee Stadium. We were Giants fans, and it was a dicey neighborhood when the Giants were still and Dodgers were still in New York.
Okay, my memory is a little different, but that doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah,
All right, but thank you.
I run several times a day, so.
As a teenager, I remember everybody's beloved. I don't know why he's beloved, but George Steinbrenner threatening to move the Yankees because Yankee Stadium was in a, bad neighborhood. And that was in the mid 70s. I hadn't really heard that before, Mars, but all I know is that attendance was poor in the Bronx, and Steinbrenner kept on saying, well, I'm moving the team. We can't afford to stay here because our attendance. And I see Renee shaking his head in approval with that.
Well, yeah, true. That was the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean,
Real quickly, I'm sorry. Real quickly, the Village Voice, I don't know if you guys remember, had a picture of two Yankees wearing NJ because it was pushing to move the Yankees to Jersey.
Right.
Thank you.
And before I go to Harvey, for those who don't recognize Noel, this is the book he wrote. It's the Bible of the Giants and the Polo Grounds. And the reason Noel spoke the first time was because this book was revised roughly the time he spoke. It's like 500 something pages. So if you need a book on the Giants other than the Sputnik season, this is a must-have. There's your plug, Noel. All right, Harvey, you're up.
No, I did read your book, The Giants of the Polo Grounds, when it first came out. I still have it on the shelf. I loved it. I still love it. I agree with you, Mars. You're wrong. And I'm stating it with certitude. My father was a glazier. He had a store on Brook Avenue in the South Bronx, not far from Yankee Stadium. I know when the neighborhood started to change, and it was somewhere in the 60s. In the 50s, it was a good neighborhood. My grandfather actually had the store before my dad, so I'm pretty familiar with that area. And I remember the ethnic change in the neighborhood. There were a lot of folks coming from Puerto Rico. And I'll share one memory which makes no sense whatsoever. It's when there was a barber. I had hair at one point, and
We all did.
and there was a barber on the same block where my dad had his store, and I would go to get my hair cut there because my dad would pay for the haircut. No, you've spurred two disparate memories in me. First of all, no, I love your commentary. I'm gonna play that recording tomorrow. So I was laughing too hard. I missed some of them. But two disparate memories. We lived in an area in the Bronx near Parkchester. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
Parkchester.
yeah.
And I
It's still
recall,
there.
yeah, I know. We had our dentist, Dr. Neal, was in Parkchester. I remember my mom walking us there was a Macy's in Parkchester. And in the window of a store, I saw for the first time color television. And it was of the World Series. And I remember that it wasn't as sharp as it is today, high def. And the color of the Braves cap was not what the real color was, and it was smudged. That was the first time I saw color TV. And on the other bookend of your book, I remember coming home with my parents. I think it was right around the Jewish high holidays that Sputnik was circling the earth. And we got home and turned on the radio. And I remember the announcer saying, "Here is the sound from outer space." And of course, it was nothing but a bunch of beeps. But at that point, that's all I could think of was, that's outer space. I haven't thought of Sputnik in all these years, but you brought that memory back. Color TV and Sputnik.
I'm sorry.
Color TV and Sputnik.
Color TV and Sputnik, very true, and flying saucers also. But an interesting thing about Sputnik, which made it very visceral as well as visual, you could actually see the little bugger because it came across the night sky. It looked just like a star, and yes, it was in space, but it came over the northeastern United States. So you could walk out at night, look in the sky, and somebody would say, "Those are the Russians." You know, they were right over you. I mean, they weren't any more than a shooting star is over you, but it was a very, very sobering moment for the United States.
Well, sure. And several years later, my brain is a little fried right now. When President Kennedy announced that we would go to the moon, I remember John Glenn circling the Earth. And I mean, I don't remember how many times he went around the Earth, but I thought it was a wonderful thing, you know, and it was.
Even if he'd only done it once and he got back, that's
a wonderful thing. Yeah.
something.
Well, don't forget Ralph Cramden sent Alice to the moon before the Sputniks.
Yeah, but consider this, times have changed. If Ralph did that today, he'd be locked up for domestic violence. So remember that. Noel, thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Harvey.
talking to you.
A man with the golden voice, Dan Taylor.
Noel, it's good to see you. Thanks for doing this. This was terrific.
My pleasure.
And I agree with you on Lou Perini. He was a fascinating guy and really brought a lot to baseball. One of the guys I've always been fascinated with on that is Fred Haney, who really, I think, doesn't get a lot of credit for the things he did in Milwaukee. And one of the things, I don't know if you came across it a lot in your research, but I've always found fascinating. So many of the movie stars were Yankees fans, but a lot of them, because of Haney managing the Hollywood Stars, were Milwaukee Braves fans. And there was this big controversy at the end of the 57 World Series where, you know, Haney was feuding with all the media and he refused to let him into the clubhouse. And the only person he let into the clubhouse was Desi Arnaz and his son. And it further infuriated all the media. And then when Desi came out, I guess they battled the security guards and wedged open the door to be able to get in. But Haney was a really interesting character and did a tremendous job with all the various personalities on that team.
They had a
Did you know
great
that-
team.
Did you know that Desi Jr., I think it was Desi Jr., or maybe it was Desi himself, went to high school with Al Capone Jr.?
I did not know that. That's great tidbit.
Factor the Untouchables into that, and that'll leave you lying asleep and
That's
awake
that's
and
great,
sleeping
Noel.
dead at night.
That's great.
Anybody else with any questions for Noel?
The comment,
Go ahead,
Gary.
Joe.
I did not know. I mean, we've beaten the fact that the Dodgers and Giants have left town. I think it changed the world. I mean, it was the golden age of baseball in New York when all three teams were there. I didn't realize that O'Malley had bought a minor league team in Los Angeles. And I didn't realize that picture tells 1,000 words of the mayor of Los Angeles at the Dodgers spring training camp. I mean, this guy, I mean, he was successful. He made Stoneham look very bad, but he had planned leaving New York, I guess, a lot earlier than, we're led to believe.
Yeah,
And I think
he moved-
O'Malley was a racist as well.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's something today, picture on Facebook, Gary was talking about it, where somebody was saying it was a picture of Jackie Robinson, leaving either Ebbets Field or him with a Giant uniform. Might have been the picture that we saw, but they were saying that after all he did, he deserved better. And it was O'Malley who was shipping him to the Giants. He didn't treat him with the respect he deserved.
Well, O'Malley wanted out of Flatbush because he saw too many black faces in the stands.
Right.
That's the
but
comment
then-
that he made.
But supposedly where the Barclays Center is, they
Right.
offered him that area of whatever it is,
No,
Flatbush
Moses
Avenue.
turned him down to that spot.
I'm sorry, who turned him down?
Robert Moses turned them down. O'Malley
okay.
wanted by the Barclays Center and the waterfront.
Right. Well, because he wanted the Long Island Railroad to bring the fans in.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. But I didn't realize, I mean, we all know he wasn't a nice person, O'Malley. Successful, yes, but I didn't realize until I saw that picture that he had planned this way before.
Well, he was a much stronger, astute businessman, more self-made than Horace Stoneham who was more of a silver spoon brat.
Right. It's just amazing. I mean, we all, somehow I could understand why the Giants left town. There was also a story, I believe, that I heard that he wanted to go first Minneapolis, Stoneham, and then Los Angeles. And he needed somebody else to go with him. So he went to O'Malley. O'Malley says, yeah, I'll go with you, but I want Los Angeles. He just kind of planned it all out.
Well, here's what I heard. I heard that O'Malley said to Stoneham, what do you want, LA or San Francisco? And knowing that Stoneham was a drinker and San Francisco had a better bar town, and Joe DiMaggio and the San Francisco Seals thrown into that mix, that's why Stoneham chose San Francisco. But O'Malley said, what do you want, LA or San Francisco?
It's possible. I mean, O'Malley's made a success. Took the Giants a lot of threatening to leave town a couple of times for them to finally become successful at the new ballpark. Because
Until the A's moved, then the attendance went from 1.6 to 800,000 for each team.
well, this year we'll see, but it's, Giants finally, it took them a long time to get on an equal footing with the Dodgers. I don't know how they do it, but
Right.
they just keep drawing 3-4 million every
Harvey,
season.
go ahead. Unmute Harvey. Harvey, you're muted.
I'm unmuted now, Gary. Noel, that photograph that you had of Jackie Robinson with a Giants banner, I vividly remember, again, I was 12. I remember hearing that Jackie was traded to the Giants. Now, I gotta, let me try to put my brain as a 12-year-old, which is not too difficult these days. I hated the Dodgers. I mean, that was part of being a Giants fan. I detest the Dodgers today. Let's just put that on the record. But Jackie was a combative guy. I remember the play. I think it was Davey Williams that he mowed down. Yeah, thank you. I loved Willie Mays. I still do. He's the greatest ball player I've ever seen. There's nobody close. So it wasn't to me. Well, let me get right to the point. I remember though when the news came out that Jackie was traded to the Giants. In that instant, I loved him. I adored Jackie Robinson. He was my second favorite player for 15 minutes. Yeah, and then when he turned the Giants on, I didn't understand. At 12 years old, you don't understand. It was an insult for Walter O'Malley to trade Jackie Robinson at all, but let alone trade him to the Giants. But you're absolutely right. If Jackie played at the Polo Grounds with Willie Mays, it might have screwed O'Malley over because maybe the Giants would have won. But that was a great picture. I don't know if you can expand on that. I'd love seeing that.
There's not too much to expand on the picture. The thing is that Robinson was offered what was monetarily a very good job with the Chock full of Nuts coffee organization. And it was like double his baseball salary. It was certainly better than his baseball salary. And O'Malley was making sure that Robinson was only offered a low salary so that he would take something else. As long as Robinson was on the team, it seems that O'Malley never felt that he really had complete control of the team. So O'Malley was more than happy to get rid of him and then to get out of town within another year. You know, if you look back at O'Malley, I'm forgetting the exact details, but he actually sold Ebbets Field and then leased it. So that way it would be easier to walk away from. I just, looking back on the whole thing, reading everything that I've been able to read on the departure of the two teams, it's hard to find a moment when you think that, well, O'Malley actually demonstrated that he wanted to stay. Once again, he didn't, you know, all these people who were so iconic with the Dodgers, Happy Felton, not invited to go with the team. Emmett Kelly, not invited to go with the team. Gladys Gooding, not invited to go with the team. There was even an issue at the time that O'Malley didn't want the word bum used anymore as a nickname for the team when they got to Los Angeles. You know, you started seeing Willard Mullen cartoons with, you know, the Emmett Kelly type character with sunglasses and a cocktail under a palm
And the stogie,
yeah, it's the stogie. You guys are really getting on my cigar length tonight with what I'm seeing here. I gotta go check the humidor. But yeah, O'Malley wanted to change the whole image of the team once they got to California. He just had enough of Brooklyn. He moved his own family out of Brooklyn to Amagansett in 1952, right after acquiring the team. That's how much he thought of Brooklyn.
Thanks, Noel.
Now,
Happy
The
felon.
great Norm Coleman.
Okay, and Noel, thank you so much. I loved your photos and your commentary. You did mention that you place Aaron and Matthews up there with Ruth and Gehrig as far as 3-4 hitters. I'm wondering where you'd place Mays McCovey.
somewhere behind those other four gentlemen. You know, it's, you make a list of the top 10 3-4 hitters of all time, and there's no shabby combination. And you can also look at individual years. I mean, look at Maris and Mantle in 1961. That's probably the greatest single season for any 3-4 hitters. But when you consider what Matthews and Aaron did in 1957, and if you ask the rhetorical question, would the Braves have won the pennant without those guys? No, they wouldn't have. I mean, Matthews gave, and I went into this in the book, there was something extra that Eddie Matthews gave to that team. And it wasn't too hard to find because he was well known as being the best fighter or brawler in the major leagues at the time. The shortstop, I think it was Johnny Logan, that's the Eddie Matthews I'm talking about, used to say, I start the fights and then Matthews comes over and finishes them for me. And if you Google in one of your free moments tonight or tomorrow, if you Google Drysdale Matthews, you'll find just some wonderful pictures of fights at Ebbets Field. Often Gil Hodges was the peacemaker. He'd be grabbing whoever was on first base from behind. Often it was Matthews who had just been hit, and Drysdale and Matthews would keep jawing at each other. Matthews would break for the mound, and he'd be dragging Gil Hodges along with him. So you can find that if you look for it.
No, you said that
Thank you, Noel.
O'Malley sold. Ebbets Field.
Mars. Norm is still talking, please.
I just wanted to
Okay.
thank Noel again, that's all.
Mars, go ahead.
No, you said that O'Malley sold Ebbets Field to who? To the city of New York?
I'm blanking on the name, but he sold it to a real estate guy who,
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
who owned the field, and he's the fellow who developed the housing there. If you want
Oh.
to see some heartbreaking pictures, you could see I think there's even a video of a demolition derby on the field on Ebbets Field, sometime around 1960, 59, 60, 61. I remember reading about a guy who took his son to see the demolition derby. This cars, obviously, on the field, and he wanted his son to see Ebbets Field because this guy had grown up in Brooklyn as a Dodger fan, and he said we couldn't even stay the whole time. I look at that field being torn up, you know, and all of the turf in the outfield with Farillo play just being trashed, you know, with mufflers and gashes. And he said it was just horrifying. It was in pretty bad shape by the time it finally got knocked down.
Thank you.
Ed Freer, you're up.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Noel. I learned a lot from your presentation. But just on a side note of the field, in your backdrop picture, I've been finding that fascinating. And are you familiar with when it was taken? And it almost looks like football field grass in the background of it too.
I
Harsh
can't see it
crowd.
right now, but we're talking about the polo grounds, right?
Right behind you, yeah, your backdrop.
Yeah. Well, I can see you, but I'm not on the screen right now.
So you don't know when that picture was
But
taken?
I think that is around mid 1950s. It's the Chesterfield on the scoreboard, right?
No,
or is
it's
it
Knickerbocker.
Knickerbocker, then it would be about
And it's the
19
late
Yeah,
57.
it'd be like 1956, 57. If you
And
ever
it
see
looks like-
Rheingold, it means that's when the Mets.
Yeah,
were
that'd
there.
be the Mets. But it looks like the grass is cut in different pattern. It's an unfortunate question I shouldn't have asked, but it was curious to when that was taken.
Thank you, Ed. Dean, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Gary. No, that was a great presentation. Thank you. I just have one question. Were there a lot of Giant fans that were angry with the team, you know, when they left, and they stopped being Giant fans? You know, I've known people that have done that.
Well,
Well-
you're looking at one of them.
Okay.
You're probably looking at more than one of them. Yeah, frankly, I stopped being a Giants fan. My history was a little stranger because I ended up going to school in Europe for a year. I basically I stayed with the Cardinals as long as Musial was there, and I still had an affinity for the team thereafter. But then I basically jumped to the Mets, even in 1962. They just seemed more entertaining than the Yankees. That doesn't mean that I didn't end up at Yankee Stadium 4 or 5 times during 1961, because the home run race with Mantle and Maris was just so enthralling. So to answer your question, I think the Giants lost a lot of fans in the New York area, and I think they ended up either with the Yankees or became Met fans.
Okay, thanks a lot, Noel.
And
Thank you.
Harvey, maybe I know you know the answer why many of the fans didn't leave the Giants. Basically, 2 words.
Willie Mays.
There you go, Harv.
Yeah.
Gold star.
But I think also, Gary, we should mention when the Giants bring the trophy back to New York, thousands of people were
Yeah.
there every
Yeah.
time. Dodgers couldn't bring it to Brooklyn. I don't think they could draw flies.
Listen, I
But
know
they're killed.
Ed Dean came to these, and he came with his son, and pictures of him and his son near the trophy, and breathtaking. And that's just the. Dean, you agree with that?
Well, like I couldn't-
Absolutely.
Yeah, we brought them to
Some
him,
event you're never gonna forget, right?
Right.
but the Dodgers, I don't think they could care less, the Dodger fans.
Absolutely. Howard Manis, you're up. Howard, just unmute, okay?
Yeah, hi, how's everybody doing? Good. Just a couple of comments. My father grew up in Highbridge, and we went to the Polo Grounds after I was born when the Mets were here. We would always we'd bypass Yankee Stadium and go to the across the bridge when we would go to the Polo Grounds to see. My father used to see the Giants play, and then I went to see the Mets play when I was in the early 60s. I also want to say about the neighborhood, it did begin to change in the early 60s. We moved in 63 to Queens. And in 65, my father took me and my brother to Yankee Stadium to see the Mayor's Trophy game, Mets and the Yankees. And our car was stolen during the game. So the neighborhood by 65 was definitely a lot different. So I just wanted to add on to what was talked about earlier. And sorry for the feedback we're getting here. I'm getting something's wrong with my phone.
Howard, thanks for joining us. Anybody else have a question?
Well, I just wanted to comment about what Harvey said about in the before the Giants moved and Dodgers moved, that he said that Yankee Stadium was a good neighborhood. Well, there were other parts of the Bronx that were much better neighborhoods than the South Bronx, because even when the Giants and Dodgers was still in New York, the South Bronx was a real dicey, right? So I disagree with Harvey on that one.
Well, I'll tell you what, Marge, let's step outside and settle this together, you know?
Like Hank
That's how we
Miller.
do it in the,
Bruce Cutler,
that's how we do it in the Bronx, Mars.
right? Well, who's going to win? Bruce Cutler?
Harvey, you were from Brooklyn, correct? Born in Brooklyn?
I was born in Brooklyn,
All
raised
right,
in the
Harvey
Bronx.
is from the honeymoon, the Bensonhurst Bomber.
I
There you go,
was
Harvey.
born in Brooklyn, raised in the Bronx. Naturally, that's why I'm a Giants fan.
Well,
All
how many
right.
times were you around?
Are there going to be
Yankee
tickets to
Stadium?
this fight? I want to see this.
I did frequent Yankee Stadium, but I'm not going to debate with you. But I remember my dad had a store, and the crime rate rose to the point where he used to replace his own windows because he was a glazier, and then he decided to brick up the window. He had a storefront. But I went to City College from 62 to 66, and I would stop off there on the way. I was living home in the North Bronx, Northeast Bronx. So I'm pretty much familiar watching the neighborhood almost in front of my eyes change.
Right, but if you were from the Northeast Bronx, that's quite different than the South Bronx.
Well, my dad's store was in the South Bronx. Brook Avenue was on the in the South Bronx. right in the
Right,
heart of.
my grandfather had a shoe repair place in the South Bronx,
Do
and
you
it was
remember the
broken
name?
into in the 50s.
Do you remember the name of the police precinct? No, I don't mean the 43rd or the 41st. You know what it was called?
What?
Is it Fort Apache?
Fort
Fort
Apache.
Apache. That's right.
Right. They made a movie about it.
You know, I always hated O'Malley, but I didn't realize that he did not invite the guy who did the pregame show. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Was it Happy Feld?
Happy
Feldman?
Felton.
Happy
The
Feldman.
Knothole
yeah.
Gang.
Yeah.
Not all gang.
What a
Yeah, they had kids on there. He had kids
Yeah.
on there. Happy
right.
Felton's
Used to
Knothole
run into
Gang.
the right field wall. Have Farillo do that.
All right, we got
And I
another
remember
question.
when
John Burbidge, you're up.
Okay, I got a question. No, one of the problems O'Malley had, he didn't get a great welcome in Los Angeles. The city council didn't approve the Dodgers coming in Chavez Ravine until, what was it, October? Right
Yeah.
before we announced it. You have any comment on that? How difficult that was? There are a couple of books about that now.
Was that a question?
Yeah. Do you have any comment on that?
I've heard about it.
Because it kicked out
I-
a lot of Latinos
Well,
in
you
that
have to
neighborhood?
realize that not everybody was terribly happy about the Dodgers going into Chavez Ravine. They basically bulldozed a very old and vibrant Latin American, mostly Mexican American community, which had been there for many years. It was a bit like the New York parallel to that was the building of Lincoln Center. That area was a Puerto Rican neighborhood, was known as San Juan Hill in, I think, the 30s and 40s. And basically urban progress in the 50s was bulldozing minority neighborhoods. And so there was a lot of, I know people in Los Angeles who to this day will not go to a Dodger game because of what was done to their grandparents. So make of it what you will, that could have been an element with the city council.
I think that's why the Dodgers didn't announce until Sputnik, October 4th.
Yeah,
The
they,
Giants left a lot earlier than the Dodgers
yeah,
did.
O'Malley was safely out of town by the time he sent a very low-level employee out to make the final announcement. He let Stoneham and the Giants take the heat and the final rush to the clubhouse in late September.
Anybody else with a final question before we wrap it up?
Well, I just wanted to say that the city of Los Angeles, through eminent domain, evicted all the Mexican Americans from Chavez Ravine. It was years later that not only did O'Malley acquire the land, but he owned the stadium. But the city of LA owned both when they first moved there.
Listen,
Okay.
Noel, can't thank you enough. Number 3, you lead the league in appearances. One last thing, again, best way to get the new book, Amazon,
Amazon, yeah. Yeah,
1957, the Sputnik season.
There's got to be better places than Amazon. I can't stand Jeff Bezos.
Thank you, Noel. That was terrific.
Noel,
Okay.
guys,
Thank
give
you,
it up for
guys.
Noel
I'm
Hynd.
Yep, thank
All right,
you.
next week we
I
have
appreciate you all coming.
next week we'll have Will Clark. God, you got to come to that one, please.
Oh, I am so there for that.
And Noel, again, we thank you. I will hang around if anybody wants to talk some Giant baseball. Have a great rest of your week. Go Football Giants.
Thank you, thank you. I've got to
Thanks,
take off because I
Gary.
need to pick my wife up after work. So
All right. Bye,
it's
Dad.
only 5:15 here.